Good evening and welcome to an event inspired by the release of author Joe Atkins' new book, Harry Dean Stanton, Hollywood's Zen Rebel. It's hard to believe, but it's the first biography of this much-loved Kentucky author. I'm Lisa Meek, one of the two co-chairs of the Friends of the Kentucky Theater Board. We're a nonprofit organization working to restore, preserve, and enhance Lexington's only historic, independent, and quite frankly, beautiful cinema. We were founded in 2012 to raise money for essential improvements at the Kentucky, including digital projectors, modern sound systems, new seating and carpeting, rewiring, and repairs to the marquee. The Friends raised nearly $1 million to fund these vital improvements, thus ensuring the theater's continued success.
Hi there, I'm Hayward Wilkerson. I'm the co-chair of the Friends of the Kentucky Theater. This is the Friends of the Kentucky Theater's first on the marquee event. So we're really excited that it worked out that we could focus on this great book and this great Kentucky actor. I want to just take a second to thank our event partners, the University Press of Kentucky and the Harry Dean Stanton Fest. The University Press of Kentucky is represented tonight by Brooke Raby. And Brooke, take it away.
Thanks, Hayward. On behalf of everyone at the University Press of Kentucky, thank you all for joining us this evening. We're so pleased to be partnering with the Friends of the Kentucky Theater and Harry Dean Stanton Fest for this event. The University Press of Kentucky is thrilled to be the publisher of Harry Dean Stanton, Hollywood's Zen Rebel, the first and only biography of this brilliant, mysterious actor and one of Kentucky's favorite native sons. This definitive volume was praised by author Ace Atkins as a glorious meditation on and exploration of one of Hollywood's most fascinating characters, and by filmmaker Tom Thurman, who said the book perfectly captures the madness, warmth, and beauty of Harry Dean Stanton's unique life and career. Tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce the author of this new book, Joe Atkins. Atkins is a veteran newspaper and magazine journalist and writer whose articles have appeared in USA Today, The Baltimore Sun, Oxford American, and In These Times. He's also the author of Covering for the Bosses, Labor and the Southern Press, and Casey's Last Chance. A former congressional correspondent with Gannett News Service in Washington, D.C., Atkins also worked at newspapers in Mississippi and North Carolina. He lives in Oxford, Mississippi, where he's a professor of journalism and heads the journalism graduate program at the University of Mississippi. Here to talk with Joe tonight is Lucy Jones, director of the Harry Dean Stanton Fest. Lucy created the festival in 2011. Please join me in welcoming Lucy Jones and Joe Atkins.
Thank you so much, Brooke. I am thrilled to be here and so grateful to the University of Kentucky Press and to the Friends of the Kentucky for letting the festival be part of this event. We had plans to do an in-person event with Joe last summer for the 10th anniversary of the festival, and obviously COVID got in the way of that. So we're really grateful to be able to do a virtual event on the actual week that is the anniversary of the festival. This week marks 10 years of Harry Dean Stanton Fest. We did the very first one in the dead of winter to coincide with the premiere of Tom Thurman's wonderful film, Harry Dean Stanton Crossing Mulholland. So we're very thrilled that Tom is going to be able to join us a little later in our discussion as well. But to get started, Joe, I want to start with a confession. It is confession time. Before I knew you, before I met you, and I heard that somebody was doing a biography of Harry Dean Stanton, I immediately felt so sorry for you because Harry is an enigmatic fellow. He's a little elusive, and he had many sides, and he presented different sides to different people. Those sides were always genuine. They were always sincere, but he was complicated, and occasionally they were sort of conflicting sides. So then when I found out that you were a film noir guy, and when I found out that you were a noir crime fiction writer, I knew they had hired exactly the right person because you kind of have to approach Harry's story the way you would approach a detective story. So I guess to get started, I'm so curious how this book came to be in the first place. Did the University of Kentucky put out a call for writers? Did you approach them with it? Did they approach you with it? What was the genesis story?
Lucy, thanks so much, and it's great to be here. I really appreciate the publisher, University Press of Kentucky, and everybody who's here for this event. And yeah, Lucy, it was a little daunting to think about writing a biography of a man who lived to be 91 years old. That's a lot of life to tell. But it's ironic that you mentioned my love of film noir. I had done I was doing a magazine piece before this project ever got started for Noir City magazine, the Eddie Muller publication. Eddie Muller is the noir czar who's on Turner Classic Movies and so forth. This is a publication that's devoted to noir film. And I did it on a character actor, Nehemiah Persoff from the 1950s. And in the course of doing that, I interviewed Patrick McGilligan, who is the series editor for film for the University Press of Kentucky. And I had done a piece talking about McGilligan's, one of his earlier books on Nicholas Ray. I'd done a piece on that before, which he had seen and liked. And after my interview with him was done, he says, well, have you ever thought about doing a book yourself about film? I said, well, I'd love to do that. I haven't come up with an idea yet. He said, well, give me a couple ideas and let's talk about it. So my idea was to do a series, a collection of essays about character actors whom I've always loved, even more than the big stars, And one of those character actors was Harry Dean Stanton. And he said, forget the collection, do a book on Harry Dean Stanton. And so I had to do some thinking about it, And over the next several months, he would pop an email to me. He would give me a phone call. I've never been pursued like this as a writer, so it was quite flattering. And then finally he said, Joe, you better make up your mind, that ship's going to sail. I said, okay, let's do it. And I'm so glad I did, because it brought me into this very unique world of Harry Dean Stanton. And you were a major sort of, element there in opening that door to me, Lucy. I really appreciate it. And so, yeah, it's a great experience. A lot of work, but good experience.
I'm so grateful that you did. I mean, all of us Harry Dean Stanton fans have been dying for this book. So it's a tremendous gift to us. And I know that it was a long process. How did you sort of begin the research process?
Well, the whole thing took around 4 years. And, at first, Harry Dean Stanton was still alive when I started the project. And of course I started making little overtures, and I think family and friends had sort of, were sort of concerned about Harry Dean. He wasn't really in very good health at that time. So, things didn't open up right away. And, I was wondering, I said, okay, I might just have to, people don't want to talk about it. I didn't know how ill he was. I knew he was quite old, but I didn't know how ill he was. And so I just started doing my basic research on his filmography and so forth. But then when Harry passed away, and I was sad I never got to meet him in person, but then the doors began to open and people felt free to talk to me, and it was wonderful. Just, family, friends, people in the film community in Hollywood. Not everybody. There's some people I never got to, but a lot of key people in Harry Dean's circle, some of whom are here this evening, Jamie James and Tom Thurman and so forth, were very important to this story. And they really opened up to me and helped me sort of feel like I actually did get to know Harry Dean in person.
Are you willing to divulge who the people were who wouldn't discuss Harry, or do you need to keep that one under your hat?
I don't know. Logan Sparks, who was his personal aide his last couple of years, I tried several times to contact him, and he never returned phone calls. And I talked to friends of his who he was aware that I was wanting to speak to him, but he didn't feel comfortable sort of talking to me, maybe divulging his own sort of personal relationship with Harry. Maybe he felt limited legally or what have you, but I never got to talk to him. Sean Penn initially agreed to an interview, but he wanted all my questions up front. He wanted approval of every single quote that I was going to use, and then it just never worked out. And he got busy, I guess. Same thing with Jack Nicholson. His agent told me, he says, well, he doesn't want to talk to you now. It's too soon after Harry Dean's death. Try him later. Tried a couple times, and Jack Nicholson's getting on up in years too, and so those never worked out. But other than that, pretty much everybody I wanted to talk to, I talked to, and it was I felt very fortunate, and I got a lot of great interviews out of this. It was fantastic. It was.
I'm curious about your own personal relationship with Harry Dean, and I apologize. This is one of those things about Zooms that my very elderly dog is sort of dancing around me right now. I don't know if you can hear, you probably can. But so FX Feeney, the brilliant film theorist and critic, was part of Tom Thurman's documentary, and he has this wonderful part in it that I reference a lot when I'm talking to guests at the festival, which is that, you know, we all kind of live with Harry Dean in our lives throughout our lives, because he was involved in cinema for all of our lives. And just mathematically, like, you absorb a certain number of like Harry Dean films as a moviegoer. And then you always have, according to him, and I totally connect with this moment where after seeing him for years or decades, all of a sudden he just ignites with you. And from that moment forward, you can't forget him. You always know who he is. He's Harry Dean Stanton. Did you have that experience with him? For me, it was Repo Man at the Kentucky Theater.
Well, for me, I'm much older than you, Lucy. It was Cool Hand Luke. It was Cool Hand Luke all the way. I watched that movie when it first came out, and I just absolutely loved it. And when Paul Newman, you know, as Luke is walking, they're in the prison yard. He's walking out to meet his dying mother on the other side of the fence, and all the other inmates are there gathered around on the porch. And there's Harry Dean with his guitar singing Just a Closer Walk with Thee. And that just registered with me. And I said, okay, I've seen that guy before. You know, I'd seen his face in other films, but all of a sudden now he registered. And so, and he did. Every time I saw him after that, I thought back to the Cool Hand Luke film. You know, he has a relatively significant role in that film. His bed is right next to Luke's, so they're right almost partners there. He sings like 4 songs in that film, so it got to showcase Harry Dean's musical side as well as his acting side. And so, yeah, that was like, that's all the way back to 1967, I think. So yeah, it was that movie.
You know, Jamie James has that guitar. If we're lucky, maybe he'll pull it out and show it to us during his segment. And then he did a lovely version of that song for us at what would have been the 10th Festival last summer.
Yeah, Jamie's got a story about that guitar too, how Harry Dean was able to get that nice Martin guitar from that
I
film.
have it. Oh, we'll have to ask him when he comes up. I was very curious because, you know, Harry was a little reticent about talking about his family and really about talking about Kentucky in general. How was that reaching out to his family? Did you find that people were willing to chat more about his history? I saw that you've got some great photos of his youth for the book.
Yeah, well, you know, again, key people, Jerry Eltsroth in Irvine, Kentucky, was a great resource for me and sort of he's a local guy who's also sort of works as a journalist, among other things, and writes for the local newspaper. And so he was a good connection for me. I found him on the internet and then reached out to him, and he said, come on up, you know. And so he was great. And then met family members who were just full of anecdotes and what have you. You know, Harry Dean was somewhat reluctant to talk about his past, and you know, and the other, you know, there are 2 documentaries. There's Tom's documentary and also Partly Fiction from Sophie Huber. And Tom gets some relatives to talk about him, but Sophie, not so much. When she tried to talk to him, Harry Dean, about his family, his past, he kind of shut down, you know. And so that intrigued me, you know. And so I did, and it's fascinating. And some of his, you know, some of his relatives from his parents were still around, maybe still are. I haven't talked to him in a couple of years, but who told great stories from his childhood. And then I got to interview his half brother, Stanley McKnight Jr., who still lives in Florida. And that whole branch of the family opened up to me and really gave me some insight as well. And then Jim Huggins Sr. and Jr. Jim Huggins Jr. was just fantastic. A constant resource for me throughout the writing of this book, as was Jamie and yourself and others. Without you guys, it would never happen, really. And Jim Sr. was great because he could go way back to Harry Dean's earlier days as a struggling actor, and Jim Jr. as well too, particularly in the later years. But yeah, what opened up the part of the mystery of Harry Dean Stanton was his relationship, particularly to his mother, Ursula. And I could go on all night about that. I don't want to take up too much time, but that was a tortured relationship, painful to to explore really into the private lives of that family, and to learn, she and Harry Dean stopped talking for years and years and years, and then they reconciled shortly before her death. And he did go to her funeral, but he would call her up late at night from Hollywood to Florida, where she was living at that time, and they would have this huge argument. And then she would get off the phone all upset and go into the Stanley Jr.'s bedroom and just give him a good spanking, and he didn't even know why, and just I mean, a lot of things happened that were painful for them to tell and for me to even hear sometimes. But she married Harry Dean's father at 17. She loved him, but she came out of a house full of children. Like, she was one of 8 siblings, I think. She was the oldest, I think. And so she obviously, as the oldest, had to take care of the kids all over the place. She comes out of that situation partly to escape it. She marries Harry Dean's father, Sheridan, who's a number of years older than her. He's got 2 daughters from a previous marriage. He's got now soon with Ursula, Harry Dean's mother, 3 strapping sons, now 5 kids in a household. So she's back into that same situation. Big adjustment. She would disappear for weeks at a time, come back. She loved to gamble. She liked to drink. She liked to smoke. I'm painting a kind of a bad picture, but she had a very loving side too. And particularly her granddaughter, Whitney, whom I interviewed, just loved her her niece, loved Aunt Ursula. And so, there's 2 sides. We're all complicated people, and that was a complicated story in Harry Dean's life.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Was there anything that really surprised you? I think will be my final question to you, and then I'll bring Tom and Jamie in. But was there anything that really shocked you in your research that you didn't see coming?
That relationship itself, as I probed Harry Dean's own sort of battles with himself, he was a guy who could be really, you knew him, and he was a guy who could be really crusty on the exterior, but a really loving guy too, who developed such loyalty. We're going to hear that from his friend Jamie and what have you too, particularly, commanded such loyalty to those who were close to him and really got to know him. Others would say, who is this ornery old guy, who will just tell you exactly what he thinks. So there's a kind of a dichotomy there. And so it was interesting to sort of probe that sort of complex personality of Harry Dean. And so, of course, there's surprises along the way with just individual anecdotes that Tom and Jamie and yourself and others can share as well. But the whole thing was like an unfolding, like I said earlier, of a world, and that Harry Dean was central to, inhabited, and so did the folks around him.
Yeah, my experience with him was that he was just incredibly kind. When I flew out to Los Angeles to interview him for the festival, he kept checking in on me, texting me, and making sure that I was okay, because he was so worried about this Kentucky girl out in Los Angeles without realizing that I'd lived out there for a long time and was very comfortable. But I noticed that when he was crusty, and this was just my experience at having him in town for the festival, when he would have those moments of crustiness, they were always followed by kind of like a sadness and sort of a questioning if he had handled something the right way. He struck me as a person of profound conscience, who was very aware of the effect that he had on other people, and was very aware that he wanted to be kind. So that was.
He and the director, Alex Cox, in making Repo Man, they had a very kind of a rough edge relationship. They were at each other's throats a good bit of the time during the filming of that movie. And of course, Alex was real young when he made that film. Harry Dean was already a seasoned actor who had been directed by the best directors in Hollywood. And this was like Alex Cox's first real full feature film. And a little bit after that film was made, Harry Dean was interviewed, and he said, "Have you ever been in a movie that turned out really well, but you felt like the director really didn't know what he was doing?" He said, "Yeah, Alex Cox." He could tell a little bit later in that interview, he said, "But tell him I love him." So,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that was a tough relationship. Alex Cox was a guest of our last live festival, and he lives very rural area of the Pacific Northwest, and he requested a certain amount of money to come to the festival because he was leaving work behind and this and that. And when he got here, he said, my truck broke down last week, and as it turns out, the amount that I have to pay for it is exactly what you're paying for me to come to the festival. And I said, Alex, that was like Harry beyond the grave saying, I'm not going to let this son of a bitch make any money off me. And Alex responded like, don't make me believe in an afterlife. So they had an interesting relationship.
Yes, they did.
Alex,
They did.
yeah, both really interesting people. So, well, I'm excited to talk more with you, but I am going to bring in Tom and Jamie, and I have their introductions right here. Tom Thurman, if you're Lexingtonian, kind of goes without any introduction. He directed Harry Dean Stanton Crossing Mulholland, along with, which, as I mentioned earlier, premiered at our first ever Harry Dean Stanton Fest, and there would be no Harry Dean Stanton Fest if it weren't for Tom Thurman, so we are endlessly grateful to him for that, but has also made documentaries about Warren Oates and Harry Crews and Ben Johnson and Jerry Wexler and John Ford and Sam Peckinpah and Randolph Scott, and that's just like the very beginning of the list. And musician Jamie James is also joining us. You know him from the King Bees and Dennis Quaid and the Sharks. In addition to being one of Harry's nearest and dearest friends, he also played with him in many bands as well as in several screen projects. And he and Harry are going to drop their newest record on February 12th. That is correct. Much like Tupac Shakur, Harry Dean Stanton is continuing to put out music. And it is going to be Harry Dean with the Cheap Dates, which is a recording from October of 1993, and it is being put out on Omnivore Recordings, which I will mention because I always talk about how everything comes back to Kentucky. Omnivore Recordings' last release was actually a release that came out in January from another, not only Kentuckian, but another Lafayette alum. Do you know who that is, Jamie?
No clue.
I'll put you on the spot. Richard Hell. Richard Hell and the Voidoids, they released their second record. They did a remastering and remixing of it.
This is actually the first time I've ever heard of them.
What?
Yeah.
No.
I know, I don't get it.
Oh, Jamie, we got a lot to talk about. We'll do that afterward. He was also an actor, musician. So welcome to you both.
Oh, great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Tom, I know that, well, we'll get to that, but Tom, I want to ask you really quickly because I'm not sure we've ever had this conversation. I don't know if you were watching a little earlier when we were talking about FX Beanie and what he says in your wonderful documentary about that moment that Harry Dean ignites with you after you've watched him for decades and decades and he's just kind of blended into the landscape, like what that moment is when you're like this guy and then you can never forget him again. Do you remember what that moment was for you?
That would be, I guess, 1973. There was no cinema close to my house. I lived way out in the country, but I would watch, my salvation was television. So I saw Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid one night on television. And that's when Harry Dean ignited for me. So that would have been 1973. I was particularly taken when in the scene where Christopherson comes back to find Harry Dean in bed with the woman that Christopherson was in alignment with, and Christopherson kicked Harry Dean out of bed. It was a wonderful moment. So that's when it kind of ignited for me, watching it on late night TV.
That's excellent. And you wound up working with Christopherson a lot after that and with Harry, interviewing both of them for separate projects. And then Christopherson obviously narrated the Harry Dean documentary.
Yes. And I came out to Los Angeles 5 times to interview Harry Dean for various projects. And unlike you, he never texted or called me once. I wonder what the difference was. Next question.
Well, Jamie, I know I can't ask you that question because I know that you were not familiar with Harry's body of work when you met him. Do you want to tell us your Harry Dean Stanton Genesis story?
Yes, yeah. But first, let me just may I just do a little personal a note of gratitude to Joe from me and from Harry's heart and spirit for doing that book. I'm going to play it. This is the guitar that Harry played and Cool Hand Luke. And when we finished the Harry Dean Stanton soundtrack for the what was that called? The not Crossing Mulholland, but the other one.
Partly fiction, yeah.
What is it?
Partly fiction.
Partly fiction. Thank you. I was telling Harry that I was going to go in and do a little bit of recording, and he said, "Well, why don't you take my guitar?" And I said, "Well, Harry, it needs some repair and stuff." And he said, "No, that's okay. You get it fixed, and you hold on to it." So I went and I got it fixed, and I used it, and I brought it back to him, and he said, "No, I want you to hold on to it, Jamie. Just hold on to it." I said, "What do you mean? For how long, Harry?" "I want you to just hold on to it. You hold on to it as long as you like." And that was that, you know. Every time I brought it up, he just said, "You hold on to it." He was a funny cat because he never ever really completely detached from his sense of poverty and struggle from his childhood. But so in other words, he would, you know, he's not gonna, he's not gonna do a you know, like what was the actor that gave out millions of dollars to his friends, George Clooney. He's not going to do a George Clooney and just give, you know, but he, in his own way, he had this kind of generous heart, and I've embraced this. So anyway, but this is what you were talking about. This is from the, and I love that scene you were talking about. So I'm just going to embarrass myself now and do a little bit for you. Okay, this is for you, Joe.
All right.
All the hard work that you talked about. Just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus, if you please. Daily walking close to thee. Let it be. And dear Lord, won't you let it be? And that was it.
That's great. Thank you, man.
That's for you. And I tell you right now, if Harry was here, and I could swear on a stack of Bibles, this is exactly what he'd do. The minute you mentioned that, he would have cut you off and interrupted you and Lucy, and he'd cut you off, and he would have started singing that, because when it came to singing, he didn't care who he cut off.
Jamie, you remember the story you told how they gave him this secondhand guitar for the cool.
Oh, yeah.
But he had a Martin, right?
That's how he got this old Martin. They brought him like they brought him, and Harry really prided himself. He was a very forthright and honest guy, really was, right? And so he said, this is one of the few times that I kind of cut corners in my career. And they brought him some kind of cheap Sears robot guitar for the scene. And so the story goes, he told me that he said, "Oh no, I can't use that. It has to be the specific. I can't use that. That doesn't fit with this kind of music. And what I need is a Martin, you know, D18, whatever the model was." And so they came back and they brought him this guitar, and he held on to it ever since then. You know, so. You know, maybe somebody's going to knock at my door and reclaim it. I don't know. Some old, but no. But Lucy, getting back to what you're saying, you know, when I first met Harry, it was interesting. I was playing with a couple of guys from a band called the Stray Cats, Lee and Slim, the drummer and bass player, in 1988. And we were doing a show at the Central on Sunset, and before the show, Slim wanted to walk up to On the Rocks, which is a nightclub above the Roxy, and have a cocktail. I don't drink, so I didn't, but I went up with him. And up there was a lonesome guy standing there at the bar. I didn't recognize him. I didn't pay any attention to him. And I said, "Come on, Jim, we got to get back." So this lonesome guy followed us back. And And Slim said, "Why don't you get up and sing a song?" And then this lonesome guy kind of said, "Well, what song?" I said, "Well, you know, one of the songs that what I love to do is El Paso by Marty Robbins." And he said, "Can I do that one with you?" And I said, "Sure." So this old kind of rubby-dub guy got on stage, and I still never paid any. I didn't know anything. I couldn't even remember how his name was when Slim introduced us. And he sang that song, and I have to say it impressed me. And he sang a verse that I'd never heard before. And I told him, I said, did you, I asked him, "Did you make that up on the go?" He said, no, that's in the song. I said, "No, it isn't. I've been singing that song for years." He said, "Oh, yes, it is." The next day I went to Samuel French on Sunset, and I found the sheet music, and it was in there. Anyway, so a couple of months or a little bit of time went by, maybe a few weeks, I can't remember. And my girlfriend at the time, her father, Dabney Coleman, was having a July 4th barbecue. And I didn't pay very much attention. I just thought, boy, that guy, you know, knew what he was talking about with that song, and I forgot about it. I didn't know he was an actor. I didn't know anything about him. I just thought he was this kind of some barfly that hung out on the rocks. And so here it was, July 4th at Dabney's house, and in walks this barfly, this kind of lonesome guy. And he sits down on the sofa next to me, and I thought, oh my God, Dabney's really sweet. He's doing something nice for this guy. The first words out of my mouth to him were, "By the way, I didn't realize the buses in Los Angeles ran on July the 4th. Did they really run on July the 4th? And because I figured he must have taken a bus, because there was no way by the looks of him that he could afford a car. There was just no way. And he was wearing the same clothes the first time I met him. That I took note of, right? I took note of that. And he laughed at that. He thought that was so funny. He was just laughing. And from there, we sang again that day, and I heard his voice, and I heard that natural vibrato and the quality of his voice and the sensitivity of his voice, and how his voice was so connected to the words. And like no other singers, he didn't force things, he didn't push things, but at the same time, it was smooth, but it was very powerful, his vocal delivery. And I became very curious about him. And, you know, he must have become curious about me as well, because we exchanged phone numbers, and he, you know, said, "Give me a call." And I called him, and he said, "You want to come over?" And I came over, and we sat one night, and we ended up singing till 4 or 5 in the morning the next day. And I couldn't believe all the songs that he knew. And that was back in the 1980s, somewhere in 87, 88. And we just kind of, you know, it just can't. He was very beautiful that way. He just opened up, and you know, there were so many charming things about him. You know, like for example, he had a wrought iron pan on his stove that he left the same lard in it for years. You know, and he had a bar of soap from France in his guest bathroom, and that bar of soap was in there for probably 2 decades. Until it wore down to a little nub. I'm not kidding.
Jamie, you didn't tell me that when I interviewed you. I could have used that in the book.
Well, book number 2. Believe me, there's enough on Harry to write 3 or 4 books if you really dig into it.
Well, Jamie, you obviously were part of Tom's documentary, Crossing Mulholland. And Tom, kudos to you. I mean, I feel like outside of Los Angeles, where Harry was obviously very well known for playing music, I feel like lots of people weren't exactly familiar with his music career as much. And you really highlighted that in a really beautiful way. How did that all come about, bringing Jamie and Michelle Phillips into that? I was always kind of curious. There's a moment where John Carpenter says, what you should really do is have Harry sit down with somebody he cares about and talk to them. I always wondered if that was John's idea, or if you were already planning to do that, and that was some clever editing.
That was clever editing. I wish I'd been smart enough to plan it that way, but I didn't. But, you know, we know Harry Dean from his roles over the decades, but people outside the Los Angeles musical sphere did not quite know, you know, Harry Dean's infatuation with music as much. So I wanted to start with that and establish that, and also it made Harry feel more comfortable. You know, I interviewed Harry over a 20-year period, and he essentially never answered a single question that I asked him. So, uh, I was in the documentary, I was able to take bits and pieces from here and here, so that when I asked him a question when he was in my Hunter S. Thompson documentary, and he didn't answer it at all, but then started talking about his Kentucky background instead, I had that to pull from. So I was able to cobble all of these things together in that fashion. So, and Jamie was talking about kidding Harry Dean about did you arrive on a bus? But when I worked with Harry Dean, he always asked me to send a car for him. So it was a different situation. And I shouldn't say this, but you never pay for interviews. Interviews when people perform or do voiceover, that's paid work, but you never pay people to interview them. But Harry Dean always said, I could use $200 or $300 for gambling money. So there was always an early handshake with Harry Dean uh, before interviews.
Beautiful.
It happened every time.
I love that. I mean, it made so much sense for Harry's career that he has like a bit part in every single one of your documentaries, and then he finally gets his starring role.
Yes.
So did you,
Crossing Mulholland ended up being the Paris, Texas in our relationship. Yeah.
so did you pay Jamie for his, did you give Jamie some gambling money?
I gave Jamie a check, but it bounced.
And so Jamie, and you're in the Sophie Huber documentary as well. Is that correct? I remember that correctly?
Well, my all of my scenes except one got cut out, but I mean, I'm at the soundtrack. Yeah, that's all Harry and I. Yes.
And oh, sorry, there's another dog situation happening. So Tom, you said that I need to ask you about a situation in an elevator. What is that?
Oh, well, I met Harry Dean we were doing the interview at the Chateau Marmont, and I met him out front to make sure that he got to where he needed to be. And as soon as we got in the elevator, Harry Dean lights a cigarette in the elevator. And so by the time we get up to the floor where the interview is going to take place, the elevator was just billowing with smoke. And so we got off the elevator. I got off first, and there was a couple waiting to get on the elevator. And the smoke just poured out, and they looked at me with just disdain, if not hatred. And then after I stepped out and they saw that it was Harry Dean smoking, then suddenly they were all smiles. So, and there was another interview at the Chateau Marmont, and it was when I linked him up with Chris Christopherson. And Harry Dean, as Jamie would know, Harry Dean was not a morning person. But Christopherson wanted to do the interview in the morning, and Harry Dean and Chris were very close. So I sent a car for Harry Dean. Harry Dean shows up at the hotel about 10:30. He's got a black suit on. His hair is greasy and kind of laying down on his head. He smells like Bob Marley. And before before he came upstairs, he went to the bar at the Chateau Marmont, which was not open yet. Found the bartender, made him make him a drink at 10:30 in the morning, and then the following day I get a $19 cocktail bill from so that Harry Dean not only got his interview money, he got a $19 cocktail right off the bat. And he was just wonderful. And he was remembering lyrics to Chris's songs that Chris didn't remember all of them. He had an incredible memory.
I tell you, during the interviewing, I found one example of Harry's generosity. Might mention here in the context of all this. I interviewed Vim Vendors, the director of of Paris, Texas, and he said he had never told this before, but now that Harry Dean had passed, he could tell it because I think Harry Dean had told him not to tell people. But when they were filming that, or toward the end of the filming, one of the assistant producers, and I forget her name, who worked on that film, she was doing an independent film, but really having a hard time finding financing for it. And Harry Dean wrote her a check, and I forget exactly how much it was. It may be in the book, I'm not sure, but it's a five-figure number, so it was a substantial amount. And he just gave it to her to help her get the film off, get going with that film. So that's an example of he maybe be a little tight here, but also generous as well.
Oh, may I just say, Lucy, I just want to say, after hearing you guys, this is kind of a testimonial for Harry Dean, but he stayed in touch with some of his old Navy buddies from the Second World War, and I watched him. He would get letters, and he would always return those letters, and sometimes these guys were down in their luck, and sometimes they needed money. And I watched Harry one time write a check for $7,000 to help the guy out. Another time, $3,000. A guy wanted to start a business once. Harry gave him $15,000. I mean, and I never ever, in all the years I was with Harry, I did not see him. He never purchased himself a new jacket. He wore the same two blazers all those years, a new pair of shoes. Nothing. But I watched him help a lot of people, including me, a lot of people. And that should be underlined, really, truly.
Absolutely.
Well, one of the things that's so telling for me is that he was incredibly generous with his time with me. And every time that I contacted him for an interview, he was there for me. He never said no. And he just said, where do you want to meet, pal? And we'll do it.
Yeah.
So a generosity of time is worth a whole lot.
And I can weigh in on that as well, because when he came for the festival, we had an event and a lot of people came from far and wide to meet him. And he got tired by the end of the night and he wasn't able to meet everybody. And he afterward said, anybody that I didn't have an opportunity to meet, have them reach out to me. And I believe every single human that wrote him a letter and said, will you send me an autograph photo? He did that for them because he wanted to make sure that everybody felt of how appreciated they were. Joe, was that Allison Anders who helped you finance?
Yes.
Yes, she's actually going to be our next festival guest whenever we're able to have a live festival again, because she had a really, really profound experience with him, and she's a wonderful director in her own right, obviously. Jamie, I know that Brooke is telling me we're going to start doing some audience questions really fast, but I want to make sure you have a little time to talk about the new record. Can you give us a little info about that?
I'll take a second. During this pandemic, obviously there hasn't been any opportunities to perform music at all. And through a series of events, I was reminded about a recording that I did with Harry Dean back in 1993 with an outfit we called Harry Dean Stanton and the Cheap Dates. And so I went out into my garage and I hunted around and I found a couple of old tapes. And through a series of events with a wonderful team at a recording company here in Los Angeles called Omnivore Recordings, that, by the way, also issued the Harry Dean Stanton soundtrack for Partly Fiction. On February the 12th, I'm very pleased to say that we're coming up with a record. It's got Slim Jim Stanton on drums from the Stray Cats and Jeffrey Skunk Baxter from Steely Dan and the Doobie Brothers on pedal steel. Tony Sales from Iggy Pop, David Bowie on bass guitar, myself and Harry Dean, and the side A is studio recordings, and side B is a night live that we did at the Troubadour in October of '93. I don't know if you can see this, but this is the CD cover that was taken in front of Harry's house, and it's also going to be. Can you see that, Lucy?
Absolutely, looks beautiful.
And this is it's also going to be coming. I just got a box. In fact, I opened it today of vinyl records. The same thing. And so that'll be available at the Omnivore Recordings website, omnivorerecordings.com for people. And also, I think other platforms, you know, I'm not familiar with a lot of the terminology, but I chose songs that where the Harry sang beautifully. I'm very proud of this product. And I had a lot of support from Jimmy and the record company and the musicians involved, and you know, I'm happy about it. You know, I think Harry would love it.
And it comes out just in time for Valentine's Day, so everybody can purchase it for their sweethearts.
That's right.
So I'm terrible at Zoom. Brooke, are you gonna help us out? Oh, and my dog's barking now. So Brooke, are you gonna help us out with some audience questions?
Yep, I'm here. First of all, the interesting little chat over here, we have Tanya Floyd, who says Harry Dean Stanton was her grandfather's first cousin. So it's a little bit of trivia. That's really cool. So question from Robert. Not really a question, but I love Tom McGuane's 92 in the Shade. McGuane? Tell me if I'm saying that wrong, you all.
McGuane.
Yeah. Okay, great. Tom McGuane's 92 in the Shade. One of my all-time favorite scenes is in the film is the Arnold Palmer scene in that movie with Harry Dean and Warren Oates. Does anybody else have any questions?
That was one of several.
Go ahead.
It was one of several films that Harry Dean made with that involved Thomas McGuane in one way or another. Also, you know, Missouri Breaks was based on original story from Thomas McGuane, and there are others as well. So.
Folks, if you have other questions, by all means, send them in. Now's the time. You got 3 experts, subject matter experts here that we want to take advantage of. Lucy.
And I would like to concur that I would like to agree that that is my favorite scene as well. And I think that it's still on YouTube. You can just watch that scene isolated because it's so good. It's just like a perfect 2 minutes.
Lucy, I want to ask you a question, if you would. So 10 years into this festival, do you have I mean, obviously meeting Harry and getting him here in Lexington and everything was a coup at the time. We thought we were the coolest girl in the world. But do you have any other favorite moments from the festival?
I mean, obviously meeting these 3 gentlemen, these are 3 friends of mine now that wouldn't be in my life. Well, Tom, we would have met eventually because everyone knows Tom Thurman, but Jamie and Joe, I have the profound privilege of having them in my life. So I think it's just the friends I've met, honestly. And I kind of realized this thing about the festival the other day, and I haven't said this loud, so I'm just kind of like spitballing it a little bit in my brain right now. But I realized that like a lot of people have like told us how we can grow as a festival and have suggestions of how to do this and how to do that. And I kind of realized that inadvertently, due to my own like sheer lack of organization, the festival has sort of become the embodiment of like Harry Dean's spirit, and that like we do our best and we try, and we're kind of like workmen, and we just kind of let it happen. Like we're oh, look at Grover. We just kind of let things come as they come, and there's been this magic that surrounds Harry, and every year by the seat of our pants, we wind up with some very cool guest and are able to do some very cool things, thanks to our sponsors as well. But it really has been just like this very organic, like not particularly ambitious labor of love, which I think was kind of Harry's thing. So I hope we're doing right by him.
Audience, still taking questions? Ask away.
While we're waiting, I know one thing I can tell that Lucy, you told me, let's see, you told me at the very beginning when we first met that as you enter into this Harry Dean world, all these weird things are going to happen, these weird coincidences and what have you. And just a month or 2 later, I was wanting to, I was trying to gather interviews and what have you. And they had the Memphis Film Festival here near here in Oxford, and often features a lot of character actors. And so I said, well, maybe somebody there worked with Harry Dean or something. So I went up to it and there really wasn't much that I could find. And I didn't find anybody, and so I was starting to leave. And then I saw Ed Faulkner. Ed Faulkner was in a lot of John Wayne movies, and said, well, maybe Ed Faulkner knows something, you know. So I go over to him. I said, you know, did you ever know Harry Dean Stanton? He says, did I ever know Harry Dean Stanton? He and I were students together at the University of Kentucky. We were on the stage together. And it was like, you got to be kidding me. And so he gave me a unique perspective that I could have looked and looked and looked and never found somebody who had acted with him, you know, 60 years before on the stage at the University of Kentucky.
That's amazing. Well, that reminds me of us reaching out to Tom Thurman at the beginning of all this, because, you know, we had the idea for the festival, and I wanted to reach out to somebody and kind of figure out how to get in touch with Harry and get his blessing. And so I cold called Tom Thurman and said, do you know Harry Dean Stanton? And Tom says, do I know Harry Dean Stanton? I've just been working on this documentary about him for the last 15 years, and it's going to be premiering in 2 months. And we said, oh, well, can we maybe like kind of piggyback on you and have that be the premiere of the festival? And sure enough, it just all sort of fell into place. So yeah, there was real magic that surrounded Harry. I'm seeing a couple of audience questions coming in, I think.
Yep.
Jim and Gina. Hi, Hugginses. We've been referencing you. Thank you. I'm so glad you're here. Jamie, what was your favorite venue in LA to play with Harry Dean Stanton? And we love you.
Thank you. Love you too, Gina and Jimmy. You know, my favorite place to play music with Harry Dean, to tell you the truth, it was actually in his living room. And we did that. So we had a regular thing. You know, Harry was fastidious about certain things. I like once or twice he got me to do like little scenes with him in movies where there might be a guitar strumming or something like that. And I remember the first time I did it, I showed up 4 minutes late, and he was standing at the gate where the cars come in to the lot, looking at his Timex watch. He wore a Timex watch. He was looking at his Timex watch, giving me the, I mean, he was not happy about that, you know. And but my favorite place so we had, in other words, he liked a certain structure, and we had a thing every Thursday and Sunday. We'd get to I'd go to his house, and he had a little PA system set up in front of the fireplace, and we'd play music. But the thing is, we didn't have, we had a starting time that was the structure. We would start at 9 o'clock, but we would go as long as, you know, and after a couple of hours of solid work, then we'd mix it with, he'd have the TV on in the background with the game show or something. And we'd play songs during commercials and, you know, work and go, you know, till 1, 2, 3 in the morning, whatever we felt like. All kinds of music, the 30s and 40s, classic songs. You know, he loved Chris Christopherson's lyrics and songs. There were so many. I learned so much from Harry Dean. And in fact, when this record's coming out now, and I'm the age now, 67, that Harry was when we recorded this record. He was 67 when at this time. When I met him, he had just turned 60, I think, or 61 or something like that. But it's a long time ago, man. It's hard to, that's really trippy. But yeah, no, Jimmy, my favorite place to play with him was in the living room. As far as venues are concerned, my favorite venue was a little nightclub on Pico Boulevard called The Mint. And we used to play, well, actually, it's a toss-up. There was a little place on Wilshire in Beverly Hills called Beau Chaos, owned by these two French brothers back in the early 90s. And we played there every Monday night for a long time. And it was kind of a little bit of a cool hangout. I remember Joni Mitchell got up and played with us. And Ike Turner saw us one night. I couldn't get him up. And Bono and that's why, over the years, I couldn't believe all these fans that Harry had. Steve Cropper was there that night, and we had done Mustang Sally, and I walked right up to him afterwards and said, "Man, I'm so sorry for our version." He goes, "Are you kidding? I loved it." And he co-wrote that song with Otis Redding. Dock of the Bay. I'm sorry, Dock of the Bay, not Mustang Sally, Dock of the Bay. And Harry loved to sing that. And it's just so many people. I remember Bill Clinton's brother Roger got up one night with us at the Mint on Pico. That was a great little room. Shaka Khan played drums with us twice there. She loved playing drums. and John Densmore from the Doors played drums with us a couple of times, and it was just a happening, man. Harry was just, people would come up and want to play, and it was just beautiful. I just had a great time. I played with them for well over 10 years, and we did pretty much a regular. He liked to play once a week, just on a regular basis, and we'd find little clubs, and we just had a great time.
Lucy,
Yes.
I just want to say that you're talking about coincidences and people coming together. Well, we wouldn't be together now if it wasn't for Joe and his beautiful book.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to make sure and make that explicitly clear from my point of view that it's a wonderful piece of work. It's a terrifically written. It has that same kind of heart and soul in it that Harry's acting had. And so I just wanted to say thank you, Joe.
Yes.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate that.
It really is. It's beautifully written too, and it weaves in so much American history and political history and cinematic history and sort of American anthropology. It's fascinating. So.
Well, thank you. Thank you. This means a lot to hear that from you guys. You're the best.
Do you have any projects coming up, Joe? Are you planning to do more biographies of more character actors?
Patrick McGilligan told me to start thinking about another one. I don't know. I've got to take a deep breath before I launch into that world again. So I don't know. Nothing right now. I got a few projects here and there I'm working on, but no other biographies right now planned.
Let's see. I'm not seeing any more questions. And Brooke, are you hoping that we're wrapping this up by 9? I just wanted to check back in with everybody because I know that the Friends of the Kentucky might want to be sharing some upcoming events with us.
I'm ready to go when you all are.
Sure.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, I'll just pop on and say again, thank you all so much. Thank you, Joe and Lucy, Jamie and Tom and Brooke, of course, and all of you who logged on to spend this evening with us this evening. It's just been really fun. All these stories, just awesome to hear. So thank you all for that. Everybody who's hanging in here with us tonight, please get the book. It's at the University of Press of Kentucky. And while we're all hibernating, no better time than to watch a bunch of Harry Dean movies. And then please also check out the Friends of the Kentucky Theater's website for more fun things like this to do. We have On the Marquee events, which is what this is. We have the stream team. Lucy and Tom are two of our film pick recommenders who are recommending great fun things and have great write-ups around their picks. And we also have a film IQ quiz every week. We post the question on the marquee downtown. We take a picture of it. We put it on our website. We put it on Facebook. So you can win prizes that way. So just while we're all hibernating during this pandemic, just delve into all those movies and books and have a good time. Anybody have anything else? Hayward, do you have anything you want to add before we go? Do you want to hit this button over here for me?
What button am I hitting?
The posting our
I just want to make a really quick shout out. Hayward Wilkerson is actually was actually the cover designer for this book. So if you love the cover, you have this man here to thank.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Hayward. And thanks to everybody. I really appreciate this. It's been a great evening. It has.
Sorry, I had to leave. My mother's 101, and she needed some help right at that very second. So wow. I had to leave. I missed the last 2 minutes, but it was great seeing everybody. I think this was a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
And thank you, everybody from Los Angeles. And Joe, again, man, fabulous work, man. Your book moved me to tears more than a couple of times, and it's just been an honor to meet you and to get to know you. And Lucy, the same. And Tom, good to see you again. And you owe me $50. And,
almost everybody $50.
I think it's time to say goodnight.
And everyone else, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Oh, one more thing. Let me just say, I have a piece of paper here that Harry Dean used to carry on his inside jacket pocket all the time. And I'm going to open it for you and show you. I found it. I looked it up, and he always kept a set, a list. He back in the 80s somewhere, he got a brand new fax machine. He was so proud of it, and he had his assistant type up all the songs we were doing at that time. And then he went in there himself and made copies on a fax. And this was a copy that he had made for himself. And I have copies that he made for me, but he used to keep this in his inside jacket pocket of all the songs that we used to do. And that's how attached he was. Music was never, ever, ever more than an inch away from his heart at any time.
Aw. Sweet.
Thank you so much
Great
for
story.
sharing that and sharing that beautiful song.
All right. See you guys.
All right.
Good night,
Good night,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you all so much.
Bye-bye.